Perfect day for a farm tour. Good morning and welcome back, or welcome for the first time. Either way, it's nice to have you here. We are going to go through everything on the farm. So I'm starting with the propagation areas, then we'll move out to the field and have a look at the flower field and what's growing. And then I'm going to show you the buildings at the end and what we do in the buildings, which I'm warning you before we get there, they are in a big mess. Actually, everything is. I haven't actually cleaned up before the farm tour. We just didn't have time. So you're going to see exactly how things look on a working flower farm in all its glory. And by glory, I mean mess. So let's get straight into it. We'll start with this propagation tunnel. It's actually got plastic on it. It's a hothouse for the winter. I've got some shade cloth on it at the moment because it's getting very hot in there. And normally we've got 3 long tables that line both sides, but I've actually shifted some to another propagation area, which I'll show you. In here, we're mainly starting seeds for the really, really big periods of the year. So our first really big push is autumn to get as much in the ground as we can before it gets really cold. We don't worry too much about getting things in before the first frost. Number one, we've had a lot of trouble trying to gauge that because our seasons are all over the place. So knowing when our first and last frost date is going to happen is we can get a rough idea with about a 6-week window. So it can happen anytime during those 6 weeks. And it happens really quick. So our summer will just sort of end and then it will go cold. So it's very hard for us to time things for cool flowers. We've discovered this is our 4th year flower farming, so we've just had our 4th sow out for cool flowers. I'll show you those, how they're doing out in the field, and I'll explain what's going on. So we will this will be filled, like we will have every single table filled with seeds to get things going for the autumn plant out or the cool flower before the last frost, which we try to aim for. And then we will grow things through the winter ready for the spring plant out. So this is full and operating during all the cold months. And right now it is actually in summer mode. I've still got a few things left to pull up. These are ranunculus that I grow from seed. I have a really good video on that on the channel. I'll link it in the description below, but otherwise you can just go search my channel and find it. Growing ranunculus from seed. It's very easy and it's a really, really I kind of find it like a rewarding way to increase your ranunculus stock. But what's going on here, the trays look very empty now, but they're actually full of ranunculus and some weeds as well, which will go. So I'm going to start pulling these up. I'll just sift through the soil and pull out the little corms, which I can show you what one sort of looks like if you want to see. This is sort of the size that they'll be. Little tiny ones. And then they'll go back in trays again next season. And then by their 3rd season, they will be fully operational ranunculus corms. It is a time-consuming process, but if you've got time and you want to increase some stock or get some really different stock that you can only get seed for, it's a really nice way to do it. Over summer, because it gets so hot in here, we put our tomatoes and cucumbers, and all of this is coming out. None of this is going to do any good in here because it's going to be too hot. I'll tell you a little bit about the construction of this tunnel, because what it is, it's actually 3 cheap hothouses that I just bought off Kogan. Just be really careful buying off Kogan. I buy a lot of stuff off there, but they've now got an opt-out button. So if you don't unclick that opt-out box at checkout, it signs you up to their membership, and then they'll bill you for $100. So be careful of that if you do buy some. I've got some in my Kogan store. So all it is, it's 3 of those hothouses, and we joined them all together. So here's where one ends and the next one begins. Absolutely every structure that you put on your farm, you need to anchor to the ground. We're actually in a low wind area here, but it will still take off and you'll lose everything. So just keep that in mind. You've got to anchor everything. So even if you're putting up a little tiny hothouse, make sure you put some star pickets in the ground and then cable tie it to that star picket so it can't take off. This one's really secure now, and I'll show you why when we go to the outside. So we just built the frames, cable tied everything together, anchored everything all the way along and on the edges. And instead of using these covers that it comes with, these are actually covers from another one I'm going to show you that I've built. Instead of using these covers that cover each section individually, we actually had it, but you buy a huge piece of plastic. This is actually obviously all covered in plastic all the way along, and you put that on. Then I just built end frames and put some old doors on it. It is shorter than a standard door, so I've just cut the bottoms off the doors, and you'll see that up the other end as well. It's got planks that run all the way along the edge here, so they're just sitting on the ground. They're hardwood, they're very heavy. Then I've just got these small scrap pieces, and they're screwed into that piece under the plastic, and it's just sandwiching the plastic in, and it is very, very sturdy. Once I get the rest of these plants out, I'll take this shade cloth off. This is just a bit of shade cloth that we use when we need it. I'll roll it back up and put it in the shed. The other thing to note is underneath the hothouse, I've run the weed mat, and it's worked really well for us. Nothing has come up. It would just be absolutely unmanageable to try to keep the grass out of here, because it'd be optimal growing conditions all the time. So that's the propagation tunnel that we use for the winter. I'm taking you over now to the summer propagation tunnel, and it's just got shade cloth. It's the same principle. This was the different structures that I bought. I couldn't get those other ones, and this is a bit lighter, but same thing. You want to put all the stakes in the ground, anchor everything down. I've got the weed mat, but it's on top of grass, so I'm just waiting for it to die off underneath. That's why it's a bit lumpy at the moment. But the same thing, except it's just shade cloth, because I've got these plants outside. Something's eaten these, and I'm just providing them with a little bit of protection from, really heavy rains and the hot temperatures and the direct sun. Things grow really nicely out here, and the airflow is really nice. It helps little seedlings get going without being out in direct sun. And then before they go out into the field, we don't usually harden things off very long, to be honest. We just put them out and they survive. But that sort of prepares those little seedlings anyway. It's been an absolute game changer for us to have these two propagation tunnels. It's been the difference between us staying on top of our rotation of seedlings and not staying on top of it, because we've got these really nice spaces to actually sow seeds. And it's just, in winter, I love hanging out in the warm one. I just get so much work done now. I really love it. I'm happy that we did it. And it didn't cost that much money. I've actually got a whole video on this one, building it. I'll link that in the description below. Otherwise, you can probably just search on my channel, hothouse build or something like that. And I've also got a video on how to build those benches as well. They're just made from pallets. I should have shown you that. I'll go back and just show you those really quickly. So these tables, they're just old pallets, and obviously really long pallets we use for these, for the long parts on the side there. So if you need to make yourself some cheap tables, go and have a look at that video. I'll link that in the description below as well. Okay, let's head out to the field. Welcome to the flower field. Let's go. It's time for a hat though. It's starting to get a bit sunny out here. I'm going to put a visual up on the screen so you can see what the layout is of this flower field. So you have some sort of a mental map of what I'm talking about when I'm saying plot 1, plot 2, plot 3. But basically plot 1, plot 2, plot 3, and then each row is named, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll tell you a little bit about this field before we get started on a walk through. We've slowly built it up. When we first started the flower farm, we had some resources. We didn't have a lot of money. We had a lot of time. It was actually during the pandemic. And it was only us setting it up. The whole thing's been built by 4 hands, basically. And in the beginning, we didn't have any machinery, and the only machinery we've got now is a rotary hoe. So it has taken a while to get this to the point where it is now. So season 1 we just had plot 2, and we didn't even have the full 8 rows. It was just, I think, there's a video right back at the start of the channel where the startup of the farm, so it's like the second video on the channel, it's the startup of the farm of how we started from. It covers maybe, I don't know how many months, but it covers a few months and just shows that very early startup of in season 1. So it has been a very slow process. We're also dealing with very hard soil with lots and lots of rocks in it and invasive grasses. You'll notice when we go down for the tour that we haven't got weed mat and we don't use it like other growers do. The types of invasive grass that we have, they can run meters away from where they're still trying to grow. So the runners will be feeding the grass that's up under the weed mat, and any hole that we poke in that weed mat, it's just going to fill up with tufts of grass. So it kind of defeats the purpose for us to use it. The second reason is I really don't like the use of all that plastic, and I can't really see the point of trying to reduce plastic use in the floral business when we're just absolutely filling our field up with plastic. And it's the same with the plastic netting that people use to grow their flowers through to keep them upright and protected from wind. We don't use that either. Every time I've used it, I've just really disliked it. And again, I can't see the point of using all that plastic in the growing of the flowers and then try to avoid it try to minimize it in the florist side of things. So we are very blessed here. We are surrounded by a really good windbreak of trees, and not a lot of wind gets down here at the level of the flower field, which has been amazing. The other thing to note is you'll notice we've got some very ugly looking fencing. It's just a net. It's our protection nets that we use on the rows to keep the small seedlings protected from birds. We're having a lot of problems with wildlife. We get wallabies, kangaroos, rabbits and hares, and they're the main problem. So they'll just come in and make a meal out of an entire row overnight. So we are in the process of putting up some new fencing, and actually our community here have contributed to the funding of that. They've been buying me a coffee, and I'm putting that money towards star pickets. And the star pickets are the fence post things. So these are star pickets. And if you're looking at setting up your own flower farm, you're going to need a lot of them. And because they're made from steel, they're costing a lot more now. So ignore the dodgy looking fencing. Hopefully by the next farm tour, which I'll do once all the flowers have grown, so it should be in the summer, our summer, which would be Northern Hemisphere's winter, we should have our new fencing in and things will be looking really good. Okay, let's get started. So we'll start with plot 1. What we've got in row 1 is dahlias, and they have just started popping up through the ground. There's one there. Everything's due for me to go through and weed the beds out. You can see there's dahlias there. Cliff salmon's coming up really nicely. We've got some knocked over labels, which I'll fix up later. These have taken about 3 weeks to pop up. I put all the dahlias in, about 200. There's a video on this too. Maybe 200 and something, I can't remember now. And then we got a cold snap, and then we got 2 frosts. So some of these dahlias had already popped up and they got hit by frost. If that happens to you and it's just a light frost, don't panic too much. The tuber will send up another shoot. I was going to go in and snap off. If it's been a really bad one, you can just dig your hand into the soil, snap off that shoot and encourage it to grow another one. But anyways, they're coming up now and they're okay. But yeah, that was a little bit nerve-wracking. So we've got 4 rows of dahlias here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I will go through and show you a tour when they've actually, we'll talk through varieties when they've actually flowered. We'll do another tour when they're flowering. And then I had some other plants, like these are loofahs, but they really suffered when we had that frost. So we're growing vegetables and flowers together this year, not only for the diversity of plants, but also we want to grow more food. And we had a veggie patch over near the house, and it was just another area to have to go and water. We were out here all the time. So I've convinced Moroni to let me have some beds and some space to put the food in here. and then it just gets watered with the flowers. And I've got to say, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be really exciting to have our food out here with our flowers. It's going to be fun. These really cool trellises I made out of grapevines. I've got a video filmed actually of how I made it, so keep an eye out for that. I'm just waiting for some plants to grow up it so I can get some really nice video footage for that video. Lots of weeds, but it's actually not too bad to pull all this out. It won't be a big job. There was a few videos, maybe in the last couple of months, where I was weeding and it was just hours of weeding. But these are my favourite avalanche dahlias, and they're popping up really nice. And we've got some more dahlias over here. I'll show you when we get to that plot. Sunflowers. This was our second succession, which did get hit by light frost. These are radiance sunflowers. They actually do pretty well with cold weather. It just slows them down a little bit, and they can be slightly hit by a frost. We're having trouble here though. I think it's birds are coming in and they're just breaking them off, and then they just leave them. They don't do anything. They just snap them off. Our first succession, which is up in plot 3, actually they took the whole row basically. So it's a little bit frustrating, and sunflowers grow so tall. You can net them when they're little, but once they get to a certain point, you can't really net them anymore. So we have to just kind of stay on top of it and hope that they don't do it. We initially thought it was the rabbits, but we really think it might be the birds, which is pretty annoying and much harder to try to combat. If you've got ideas of how to keep the birds off these things, please let us know. So the radiant sunflowers are between 50 to 60 days, but because we plant them so early, they take a lot longer. It's not its optimal growing conditions. But, within about a month or so, we'll have some sunflowers off that. Then we've got some status. So this is last year's weeds along with the status. But you can see how beautiful and tall and lush status can be in its second year. Status is a perennial, which means you don't have to re-sow status every year. You can leave it in the ground. So if you get some status plants or some status seed growing, really care for it in its first year, and then we overwinter it, which for us we do nothing. We get heavy frost. We get to about below -6 degrees Celsius, but it survives. It's fine. I'm not sure what you would do in a snow area. You might have to cover it, but yeah, it will keep growing, and it grows beautifully its second year. We have a row of feverfew. If you haven't come across us before, you won't know that we actually grow our feverfew now from cuttings. So we will take little cuttings of the plants that are just in the row, put them in pots or straight into the ground, and it reshoots a new plant. I've got a video almost finished filming for how we do that, because what we've found is it is just a much better, quicker and more robust way to grow feverfew. You end up with we've been ending up with much taller plants and just hardier. They take off much quicker. You're not wasting those first 4 to 6 weeks with seeds trying to get them to the seedling stage, and you're not spending a fortune on plugs. I would never buy feverfew as a plug. It is one of the most easiest plants to grow. So keep an eye out for that video. It's coming up soon. Subscribe and get your notifications if you don't want to miss that. What we also found with the feverfew is it flowers and then it's just kind of dead space in a bed. So with it and the sunflowers, we've started just planting half rows of it. So our rows here are 12 meters long, and we're just planting 6 meters of each because we succession plant it. So we've got other rows of feverfew. So we will pick from it. When it's finished picking, we pull it out and we use the space. We don't perennialize the feverfew, even though you can. Same with the sunflowers. As soon as we've finished cutting, we rip it out and we use that space. This is more feverfew. So it's in the second half of this row, and it's at a much smaller stage, as you can see. On to the next row. This is another double row. So we've got 2 different types of flower. This is a daisy type plant. This is actually something that I planted way back in autumn, and it is just taking a really long time to take off. Probably maybe tripled in size. It's probably taken 2 months to do that. Taken a very long time. And then we've got Canterbury bells, which are a cool flower, and they're very, very slow. It's our first season growing them. I don't think they're supposed to be this slow. I think our weather this season has just really messed us up. We didn't end up with many spring flowers again. We had sort of a very early onset of heat. We thought winter's finished, spring is here, and we're moving into summer really early. So a lot of things went out and they got that kind of burst of heat, and then it went cold again. And when the daytime and nighttime temperatures are fluctuating so much, like, you know, especially when it's 20 degrees difference, plants really suffer. They don't like that at all. I mean, as humans, I guess we don't really like it that much either, but we're still having very cold nights, and it's really messing up the growth of the plants. And we had this problem all of last season. The entire summer did this, so we're really, really hoping it's not going to do that again. Okay, next row we have another trellis, which I haven't got anything on it yet, but I do have some zucchinis in here, and they're growing okay considering they got hit by frost. They have actually bounced back really well. And then it's hard to see, but I've got spring onions in here. They're just, they're the tiniest things in the world. And then the last row I don't have anything in. It's actually got some sunflowers that have just popped up. I'll just leave those. I'll weed around them. This is going to be my cosmos row because it's fairly shady until about lunchtime. And cosmos loves to grow in sort of, it sort of likes those shoulder seasons like spring and autumn. It slows down a little bit in the summer. It gets really hot and it doesn't cope as well. I actually use cosmos for foliage. The cosmos foliage is amazing. I love it. I've got a video about cosmos, so you can have a look at that. Last season we got a disease in the cosmos. We had to rip it all out, but we had some plants that were absolutely fine. So I saved seed from those. I didn't rip those out. I let them grow, make sure they were disease free, and I saved the seed. So that's the seed we're using this year. Plot 2. This first bed was marigolds. But if you know about marigolds, you know they absolutely hate the cold, and they all got hit by frost, so we need to resow those. But marigold seed is so cheap. We saved it. We've got thousands of seeds. So we got that in knowing that it may not grow just yet. Oh, my earring just fell out. Knowing that we might have to resow that, so we don't really care. I don't know where my earring went, but it got lost. Oh, I really love these earrings too. My friend made them. Look, they're little like flower gardens. Where would it be? Found it. We're back. Okay, row 2. So this has actually got Sweet William. So the Sweet William's coming up here. It can sometimes for us it'll flower in its first year, but it's actually a plant that will generally flower in its second year. Sometimes when you get it in as a cool flower in autumn, that kind of tricks it if it gets a bit of heat. It tricks it into thinking that's its first season, and then it'll flower in summer. Considering we had it in before that burst of heat early in our spring, we're hoping that it thinks it's had its first season and it's going to flower again this summer. If not, it'll just sit here and we'll have it for next year, which is what normally would happen anyway. And then coming in all through the Sweet William is Luxbar. And this is where we planted our Luxbar the very first year. We haven't sown seeds since. It just naturalized here and it'll just keep coming up. So we just let it grow. We enjoy it. And we also, in this row, we've got about a bit of a sandwich going on. We also get some mint come up in this row, and we've left it too because it is one of the prettiest, most beautiful smelling fillers. So there's a few little pockets in through this row of mint as well. So it's a very heavy kind of planted row. I will come out and get rid of some of the weeds. I'm due to do a weed on the whole paddock. I'll spend a whole day out here just tidying everything up, and then we'll have beautiful flowers. Next row, I've got some of my cucumbers. They got hit by frost. You can tell these young leaves that are not looking too good, but they've actually bounced back, and they are going to climb up the trellis, which is going to look really cool. And then the rest of the row is dahlias, and I can see they're popping up and they're growing healthily. This is another row of dahlias. This row has nothing in it. It's ready to be planted out. It was a sunflower row in the past, so it does have some sunflowers that are just coming up. I'll leave those there, and I'm not sure what we're planting in that one yet. This is a test row of feverfew. These are plants that we have been cutting back and letting regrow each season. I can't remember which season we actually started this in. It might have been season 2. So this might be onto their 3rd year of growth from these plants, or the 2nd year of, I'd say it's the 3rd year of growth from these plants. We just wanted to see what would happen. And yes, it works. As long as when you do your cuts for each plant, you do it right down low, and then they send up new shoots. The problem with it is, and the reason we don't grow feverfew like this anymore is, I'm touching a spiderweb, yuck. The reason is it is a very long time between successions. So sometimes if this flowers soon, we'll get another flush of flowers at the end of the season. But other than that, we've just got a row sitting there doing nothing most of the time. That's why we don't do it like this anymore. That's why we let them flower, cut the flowers. When we finish cutting, rip the row out, and we've already got another succession going somewhere else. And that's why we do it from the cuttings, because we discovered the cuttings give us a much quicker growth pattern than starting from seed or letting them naturalize and perennialize. This row is a bit of a mess. We haven't actually cleaned it up yet. This was my vegetables over winter, so it had carrots and all the root veggies up through here. This is just due to be cleaned up, and so is this last row. This one had our snapdragons, and we've got sea holly, and these last 2 rows are just a mess, a bit of a snake hazard, so I'm watching where I'm walking. And there's one of my trellises that fell over. This is what I mean by you got to anchor everything. I actually think I need to go through and just put a star picket on each trellis just to make sure it can't fall over. Let's have a look at plot 3. Plot 3 is our worst plot of the entire field. We've got plot 1 and 2 in a really good place with the soil, and we've added to it each season. Plot 3 was the last plot we built, so it was built last season. And the soil's terrible. It's still got a lot of rocks in it. It's just a big process of getting it prepared over the season. This plot that isn't too good, we plant plants up here that can deal with crappy soil, basically. So I'll put a list up on the screen, but it's things like Nigella, Rudbeckia, I can't remember the others. I'll just put them on the screen for you. So there's certain plants that can go up here, and also I can put some potatoes in to try to help the soil a little bit too, help break it up a bit. But other than that, if we put anything too exciting up here, it won't grow very well. This first row was Nigella, but we didn't look after it. The weeds have just absolutely taken over. So our best course of action at this point, I mean, the Nigella is close to flowering. I can feel the little buds in under the foliage, but it's so small because it's had to compete too much that we probably won't bother. Here's one that's just self-sown from last season, and as you can see, it's doing a lot better. And that's something we've learned about Nigella. It actually does better in its 2nd year, and it does better if it self-sows. So that was the plan for this bed. We were going to sow the Nigella, just deal with, less than optimal plants this year, and then let it self-sow, and then we'd have really good future years of Nigella. But it isn't going to work out because the weeds are too bad here. So we need to really prepare the bed and start again. But it's not too late. We'll get the plants of Nigella in again, and then hopefully next year we'll get really nice plants coming up. So it's kind of like a obsolete row this year. We're not going to get anything off it. Here's another bed of feverfew. We actually have a whole bed of it here for two reasons. We did half the bed with cuttings that we'd grown in pots and then planted out, and then the back half of the row, oh, I just walked through a spider web again. It's so gross. They grow between the star pickets and I forget to look. As I was saying, this half of the row was grown from seedling cuttings that we had in pots, and we tried on this back end to just put the plants straight into the ground, and to be honest, they're pretty much the same. This end up here, there's a problem with the soil, that's why it's yellow, so we can't sort of use that in the experiment. But yeah, otherwise everything kind of looks pretty similar. This next row was our kale, and I'll come out and do the last pick of it before we clean out the row. But look how pretty it is. It's so gorgeous. What actually happened with the kale was we had two varieties in. There was a white one and then this blushy pink and green. As soon as we got that hot few weeks, the white one just bolted, so we couldn't use it anymore. So what happens when kale bolts, if you don't know, the center will start to elongate and come up, and then a flower head will form. So that's what happened on the white ones, which at that point we won't use the cut flower because it doesn't look right. Anyone who knows flowers will know, well, that has bolted. But these ones didn't bolt. So I am thinking of, this is really expensive seed too. I'm thinking of letting some of these bolt if they ever do, and collect some seed off these because they are really happy in this climate. I'll put the variety up on the screen, so if you want to try this variety, if you have very unreliable spring seasons, maybe this one will work for you. It was just really easy to grow, and we didn't need to net it. We did have a net on it, but it was fine. The stems are quite strong on this one as well, and they're gorgeous. They didn't grow as tall as we would like. I think there's just some things about our season that we couldn't control, but there was also some things about us not knowing how to grow kale that we could have controlled, but we didn't because we just didn't know. So I'll talk more about kale in a later video. At the back of this kale row, we had our first succession of sunflowers, but as you can see, they've all had their tops cut out except for about 3 in the middle here. And they're regrowing, they're going to branch now, but everything got nipped off and just dumped onto the ground. And we initially thought it was hares or rabbits, but then someone in the viewer community suggested it was probably birds, and I think they're probably right. We have lots of problems with cockatoos and they're just so destructive. So that makes a little bit more sense that it was probably them. And we're not sure, like I said, how to manage that. These next 2 rows were the ranunculus. And considering the terrible soil we put them in and the weed pressure, they actually did pretty good. We just need to go through now and lift all the corms and prep these beds ready for something else. There was a little tiny bit of ranunculus I can see a spider web on there. A little couple of meters of ranunculus here as well. And then we had some daffodil bulbs that I'd purchased from another farm. I didn't know what the variety looked like. I just got them in the ground to keep them alive, see what flowered. And I've since moved them out into my just house garden. They probably weren't like amazing varieties that I'd really keep for cut flowers, so I'll just keep them for me. This is another row of feverfew. It's spiderwebs. It's got the buds on it, and there are some flowering already. So I'd say this was probably our first succession this season, but since doing this, we've decided we'll just do half rows. So that's why over the new ones are just half rows of feverfew. And then our final row for this plot is actually a vegetable row. So Moroni's put snow peas on the trellis. I'm actually going to oversow those with green beans because they're going to die off as soon as the heat hits them. They've got some flowers, so we'll probably get a few snow peas, but it won't last long before the heat hits, I suspect. And then in the front here, I've got some little baby boo pumpkins, which are those gorgeous tiny little white pumpkins. I really need to come out here and help all of these get back onto the trellis. But that's that. And then I do have one sneaky row over the back here where I planted watermelon and pumpkin. But unfortunately, I did it right before the cold snap hit again, and it got hit by frost twice and it didn't have much protection, and they've all died off. So I need to come back out here and replant everything. Those who were watching along earlier in the season would have seen me prep that bed, and I've just got big pieces of cardboard down with chip bark on it so the vines have somewhere to go, and as they get bigger I'll add more, just so the grass, we don't have to deal with the grass in amongst all the vines. This area back here, I've got some hops vines. I'm actually putting a big arch here that will lead out to the I'm putting more veggies out here in the future, so it'll just lead out to a veggie patch. And on this side is the chrysanthemums, so that'll be the chrysanthemum patch out here at the back of plot 2. And then I'm considering hydrangeas up the back here. I've got a lot of cuttings in the hothouses that you may have seen earlier, but we have a massive pile of concrete here that we still have to get removed. One last thing to show you while we're out here in the flower field before we move into the buildings, and that is our future cocoon tunnel. If you watched last week's vlog, I was hammering these poles into the ground. We've got a lot of rocks, so this is as far as I could get it in, and might have to turn it over to Moroni now with a sledgehammer or something to try and get it in a bit further. But the reason I've got the weed mat along the edges is when we get the hoops up and the plastic is resting here, we didn't want grass growing up along the edges. So this is to keep the grass away, but it'll come up through those little holes. That is to keep the edges really neat and tidy. And the future plan is to have 3, so we'll have 1 here and then 2 more over here. But they'll be close enough to each other that the next row goes here. So there'll be no grass between each tunnel. And I might put some up along the back as well to keep it off the back. Just had to get that in before the ground got really, really hard and I couldn't get it in anymore. So that is coming up in the future, of that going up. And the plan is we're going to start some beds in there very, very soon, because I want to put a row of pink dahlias in there. And the reason they're pink is we usually get our first frost right before Mother's Day, which kills off all the dahlias. So if you haven't been following along, you may not know that this is our income. We make our income off the flower field and gardening and the florist business. So we have a florist business running, which generates income for us. And the less flowers we have to purchase in, the more money we make, basically. And in some cases, the less pressure on us to have to sell as much product, because we're not trying to recoup as much funds. So the more flowers we can grow, the better, and especially around Mother's Day, because in the past, my Mother's Day flower bill has been like in the thousands to pay for those flowers to sell for Mother's Day. So if I can get some dahlias growing, have that tunnel over them by the time the frost hits, I'm hoping I'm going to get some flowers for Mother's Day and reduce my florist bill a little bit. We also have some plants in and around the house yard. Not a lot, but I'll just quickly show you a couple of garden beds that I've planted mainly bulbs in and hydrangeas. I'm in the process of putting hydrangeas in, so we've got some little ones I grew from cuttings last season. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here, a bigger one here. I've got a heap around the back, and the plan is to use a lot of this area for hydrangeas as well. Hydrangeas are another one of my favourite flowers, so I'm going hard on them. I did 100 cuttings. I can't remember when it was. I think it was in autumn. So I've got just over 50 of those that have taken really well. Some of them grew so well, I've just popped a few out. The rest, I'll just baby them over the summer, get them bigger, and then pop them out next spring. So that's the plan with that. I just want to have masses of hydrangeas. And then in through here, I've just got calla lilies kind of popped around. And I haven't grown a lot of them because I won't use a lot of them. It'll just be something that just lasts a couple of weeks each season in bouquets. And then in through here, I've put the glads. I've got like there's yellow ones, peach coloured ones, and some red ones. I can't remember where I put the red ones now. I really love glads. So I wanted to put them in the house yard so I can look at them all the time. So most of their growing season, I'm just enjoying them. And then if I need them for a bouquet or something or an arrangement, I've got them there ready to go. And then this garden here is a new garden that I'm working on. That's why all the plants are so small, but it's going to be a perennial garden and it'll just kind of take over this area. I just remember this is where I put the red glads. I've got some of the newer varieties of dahlias that I need to just sort of baby for the season to build up tuber stock for them. And more glads over here. Now what I'm going to do is take you over to the future flower shack. This building here is the current flower shed. I will take you in there in a minute and show you what we do in there. That's where we have all the florist supplies and where all the cut flowers go as we cut them or as we buy them in, and then I work on them and turn them into money basically. But the future is this shed here, which doesn't look like much, and I'm sorry about the junk. We've got to do a tip run today. So this little back area, rotary hoe and the ride-on lawnmower will go in here. I just got to get some nice stones, but also in along the sides here, I'm going to be putting hooks to hang my wreath forms. There's some old ones there. Every autumn I make a whole heap of wreath forms ready for the year out of grapevines or sometimes other vines that I can find. I let our orchard kind of overgrow a little bit, and I use the really tall shoots to make wreaths out as well, so off the apples and the pears, and they work really well for wreaths. So that's going to be where they're stored. But this shed here, I've been prepping it to turn that into the new flower shack. So I've got some lilacs here and here and here, and there's one over there. So in the future these will get really big and purple. I'll have a purple door on the side here, and I've got a purple climbing rose to grow across it. So if you can imagine it in the future, it's going to look so cute. But what I'm doing is I'm cutting a door out the side here. I've got nice old French doors, a pair of white ones, some paving in the front here and a little awning. Those doors are all getting closed in. I may have that one opening with a nice purple door. I've got one that's got carvings of flowers on it. And then mostly this will just be, because this is the east, so it gets a lot of sun. This is the north, it gets all the sun. And inside's a massive mess. You'll see that right now. We've got a lot of things stored in here. This will be the new flower studio. Pretty small, but it's all we need. And then this end here, the plan is to put a cool room in the back and just a walkway that goes out the side here. So there'll be another door here and then a pergola here, just so we've got an outdoor working space. It's undercover. If it's raining or it's really hot, we've got somewhere to stand, and that's on the south of the building, which for us in Australia is in shade all day and pretty much all year. So that's the future. Now I'll show you what we're using as the temporary space, which is actually a really, really nice space. It's nicer than what this one's going to be, but this one's going to have more character when I get this one done, which I like the idea of. Over to the workshop. This is the actual workshop. It's full of tools and things, but it's the biggest mess. I don't really want to take you in there. But around here is the current flower studio. We have a lot of work to still do on the outside. I haven't painted this yet, and we need to do pathways and a little bit of decking and things. But in here is where all the magic happens, and realistically, it's where the money is made. You'll have to excuse the mess. Okay, so as you walk in the door, I've got my office here, which I've had my daughter playing Lego, and I've been dumping sewing projects, and it's become a bit of a dumping ground because I'm in the middle of a whole heap of jobs at the moment. But I do filming for YouTube in here. This is the indoor space. When I can't film outside, this is where I come and film. So it is a cute backdrop. I'm not 100% happy with the lighting, but I will work on it. Oh, I can't show you that with it turned on. The reason it flickers is they're LED lights and they cycle. They're not like a constant light, and it doesn't match with the frame rate that I'm filming at. So that's why it's flickering. But this is my grandmother's chandelier that she had. So the rest of the room, it's fairly makeshift setup. This is actually a room for another purpose down the track. But for now, these are going to cycle now too because they're LEDs. I'll just turn them off. I've been to the wholesaler, so I've actually got a whole heap of things that I've bought here. The Florist supplies wholesaler. I also have a video of that. So I walk you through the huge warehouse where florists can order their products or go in and buy stuff. So you can check that out as well. I'll link that in the description below as well. But basically the setup is, so I've got flowers here. They're here ready to make up flowers tomorrow. Most of these have been purchased from the wholesaler. I purchased the pin cushions from a local grower. Everything here I've bought from the wholesaler. So what happens is I bring stuff in, I clean up all the stems. I've got baskets under here to put compost in. So I clean up all the stems and then straight away I store everything in clean buckets with clean water, and I use this Crystal Professional 2 solution. Everything gets stored in that because it helps preserve the flowers for longer. It keeps them fresh and it keeps the water really nice. So it'll sit there till I work on things. And then I pretty much, this is my workspace, and then this is where I wrap here. And I know I've talked about not using plastic. We have been using this plastic wrap for years, which I know sounds very unfortunate, but the reason is we relied on roadside sales for years. So we've been doing that for like the last 3.5 years, selling flowers roadside. And when you take flowers out into the wild, basically, like on the side of the road in a van, they really get knocked around. So they get knocked around a lot on the trip, and then they get wind blowing on them and just a lot of handling on the side of the road. If we use paper for that, the bouquets just look like trash. The paper gets really crinkled up and it doesn't stay nice. So we've used the plastic wrap, which stays looking nice. Nobody's ever complained about it. We don't feel 100% good about it, but there's also, I mean, we're a business. You've got to be able to make money, and no one's going to buy flowers that look trashed. So you do kind of have to toss things up, but we are changing our business model a little bit, which I'll have to talk about in a future video. And we are just using up the last of this plastic wrap now so that we can just do full paper wrap. I have lots and lots of videos about wrapping flowers, so you can check those out. Oops, more florist supplies in here. So just, you know, the pricing picks or the card picks to go in arrangements, especially if you're not using paper. If it's a vase or something, you can pop that pick down into the arrangement and secure the card on here. Little things, I've got the little pins for weddings, wires. Oh, I have a project I haven't worked on. Glass vials. Some tissue paper, which I don't use a lot because it doesn't hold up very well. We've got the mossing pegs for when I do arrangements, and you're securing small things down to either foam or moss, or to keep the moss in. Some It's a Girl, It's a Boy things, different kind of tapes and small wires, cable ties. Everyone needs cable ties. Leaf shine. If you haven't seen leaf shine in action, it is the most amazing thing. And then the glory, which is what you spray on wedding bouquets, and it keeps them, it preserves them a little bit because they're going to be out of water for so long. Gloves, boxes, bags, ribbons. I've just done a stock up on ribbon. They're in there. Stickers, business cards, and then down here is just stuff that we use when we go to markets. And then over here we've got a big rack which we use to store bulbs. So yes, we store everything and it all just sort of packs in there really tightly for the winter. Now that we're pulling out ranunculus corns, they will go stored on there for the summer until they go back out into the field. I forgot to mention, we've got a split system air conditioner in there. So when it gets warm, that goes on as low as it can just to keep everything cool. But we often have a very high turnover of flowers that we sell. So we don't have too many problems with flowers going off. That concludes the end of our farm tour. Thank you so much for being here. If you've got questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below. If there's lots of questions about the same thing, I might do a live soon, and then you can find out more detail about different aspects of how we run things here on the farm. And I hope to see you again next week. See ya. Bye.